Set to go.
Thank you. Welcome to a meeting of the Town of Barnstable's Comprehensive Financial Advisory Committee. Today is March 27th, 2023. This meeting is being recorded by the Town of Barnstable and will be broadcast after the conclusion of this meeting. The agenda is on the town website. Chuck, will you please call the roll?
I will. Lillian,
Here.
Hector,
I'm here.
Neil,
Present.
Wendy. I think Wendy's on the other call right now. Chris,
Here.
Chuck is here. I don't see Jackie, but I'll ask Jackie. So we do have a quorum, so we're good to go.
Thank you very much. We're going to jump right into the agenda. Tonight, we welcome Superintendent Sarah Ahern, and I see the Assistant Superintendent, Kristen Harmon, welcome, and Chris Belli, Deputy Finance Director, School Finance. Thank you all for coming to present your FY24 budget. I guess it's all new for you guys. As you know, CFAC reviews and writes a report for the town manager that summarizes our findings and recommendations of the school budget. And since the school is 60% of the operating budget, we are always interested in what you have to say. So we're ready whenever you are.
Great, thank you. Mark, I think you've given me hosting privileges, so I will share my screen. But after I thank you for having us here, indeed, Assistant Superintendent Kristen Harmon is here, as is Chris, who you've noted. And Chris has jumped right in starting in January and helped put together this year's budget for the school department. We are, let me see, I'll share my screen now so you can see it and we'll get started. Okay, are you able to see it?
Yes.
Yes.
Perfect.
All right, so this indeed is the same presentation that I gave to the school committee and the community at the public hearing, although I will not go through every bit of detail. That clip is available if you wish to see it. I just figure you might want to ask some questions. I know you've had this material in front of you for a bit.
Right.
So last week was the public hearing, and tonight we are here presenting to you as the Financial Advisory Committee. The next step in terms of the school department budget will be next Wednesday, April 5th, where I anticipate the school committee will take a vote on this budget. The major budget drivers of what would be a level service budget for the school department would include primarily wages through our collective bargaining agreements. That the salaries of our faculty and staff are by far the largest component of any school department budget. And so wage increases through the CBAs are a major budget driver. Naturally, as you might imagine, inflationary pressures on fuel, facilities and maintenance, software licenses, and supplies is also another one of the major budget drivers with respect to level service. And then providing mandated services to account for some shifting demographics, primarily in the area of translation and interpretation, is also one of our major budget drivers. But you'll see tonight kind of some additional budget enhancements and investments proposed to support the unique needs of the learners here in Barnstable. As part of the budget development process, we take into account those budget drivers of level service and consider department requests from our school principals as well as our directors through the school. The schools have a school council by which they can vet their budget proposals. And I think that's a measure of school governance that is an important one. We had 96 submissions from our 18 cost centers for a total of $4.1 million in requests, 47.32 positions. And there were some major themes that emerged from our cost centers. We have seen an increase in the number of multilingual learners we have in Barnstable. We're over 20% at this time. And we had a request from many of our departments for more support, particularly we had multiple requests for staff positions called family and parent liaisons, which assist with family engagement. We also had translation and interpretation requests, as I had noted, as well as some additional staff to support instruction. Instructional leadership, we have kind of an inequitable distribution of assistant principals at our K-3 schools, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. Other instructional focus areas included curriculum materials, as well as a department head for English language at the high school, and paraprofessional support for our youngest students. We're seeing an increased number of students who are coming to us without having formal preschool experiences, who might not be school ready in some of the traditional senses. And so many requests for additional paraprofessional support at our youngest grades. In terms of what I prioritized in terms of putting in the budget, not all of the requests that came through the cost centers have been incorporated into this proposed budget. There is an element of reviewing the requests against what are shaping up to be some longer term goals. So in that gray box are opportunities for district improvement that I identified as part of my entry plan coming into the district new. Shared vision, focusing on curriculum and instruction, being sure to focus on talent development and recruiting and retaining high quality educators, and then facilities planning long term. And so some of this shaped the budget requests, but in addition, I took into account a few other pieces of observations that I made. The first was equitably allocating resources. We have, as I noted, an inequitable allocation of assistant principals K-3, but we also had an inequitable distribution of those paraprofessionals. So the budget includes additional positions to support our K-3 schools for those two roles. We also wanted to make sure that we're paying attention to our multilingual learners and special education equitably across the district. So taking that into consideration and making sure that we're meeting our state mandates in terms of educating students through those departments. Our staffing, we are in some ways struggling with staffing, and in other ways, I think we're doing fairly well as a result of kind of coming back after years of disrupted learning. We do know, though, that we need to be a little more creative in terms of our recruitment and retention. And so there are elements of this budget that involve some additional professional development. And then that succession planning that my slide is referencing has to do with the assistant principals and thinking about a career ladder that we have for our administration. We are also looking to build a career ladder to generate more ESL teachers in the district. We're looking to put in some more curriculum supports for English language learners as well as our preschool. And there is some funding in here to support our facilities. The facilities department has not seen an increase in their budget since 2016. And we are in the process of doing a facilities conditions assessment. It is not yet done. So I'm not sure if this proposal hits quite the right mark in terms of an increase, but I have proposed a 10% increase to our maintenance department, as well as 2 additional positions to acknowledge the additional work that they're doing, the aging of our facilities, and what I anticipate to be some significant recommendations from that conditions assessment. The last bullet here talks about funding evidence-based programs to close achievement gaps aligned with the Student Opportunity Act. The Student Opportunity Act is the big story, it's the big headline here in terms of where Barnstable sits with respect to our funding coming from the state. There's a opportunity here, and I think the spirit of the Student Opportunity Act would have us invest our monies where the additional Chapter 70 money is targeted for, which includes special education, multilingual learners, and students who are economically disadvantaged.
May I ask a general question?
Sure.
Just what's the recruiting environment like these days? You know, you're finding the talent that you're hoping to find when you recruit. Are the number of applicants, you know, to the number of new teachers you hire, has that changed? I'm not sure what metric you use. I'm just kind of interested in what the general recruiting environment feels like these days.
I think it's really competitive right now. The number of applicants that we have for positions, I think, has gone down. We are able to fill many of our positions, particularly for classroom teachers. But some of our most specialized positions, like school psychologists and speech and language pathologists, have gone vacant for quite some time. So some of our cost centers had actually proposed some of these highly specialized positions. And while I think we need them from a practical standpoint, haven't put them forward or recommended them in this budget in lieu of other opportunities, because those are some pretty difficult areas. ESL is another area that's been hard to fill, but I think that we have some opportunities within our own town and region to help develop educators. We're doing that with special education. Bridgewater State is running a pretty low cost graduate program in connection with Cape Cod Collaborative, to which we belong, which should help us get some additional educators licensed to be special educators. So it's really, our approach has to be really varied, and we're doing more outreach than we had before, attending job fairs. Kristen Harmon just attended a job fair up in Cambridge. Falmouth attended as well, and a number of other, not a ton of districts, but some districts attended that job fair. There's a couple other job fairs coming up this spring. We're really trying to get our word out. There's a video that we're putting together to promote the district. So it's we're making it happen, but we certainly don't have the same number of applicants that we used to.
Got it. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Okay, so a summary of the recommended operating budget is on this slide, where the overall request or proposed increase is an increase of 7.79%, or an FY24 budget of $82,761,867. So that is certainly a large figure, and not one that I put forward lightly in any regard. But I think that what I share with you in terms of revenue coming in from the state ought to support or should, I hope, demonstrate support for this budget with respect to what's happening with the Student Opportunity Act for the town of Barnstable. So I'd like to talk a little bit about how the Student Opportunity Act is impacting us. I don't know everybody's background in terms of school funding, so I'll try to set a little bit of a background situation so that everybody has the same info. But Chapter 70 funding is determined as follows. First, the state defines and calculates a foundation budget, which is what they determine to be an adequate funding level for each district. This depends on your student population, depends on the grades you serve, the programs that you have, and the demographic characteristics of your students. For example, high school students, they consider to cost a little bit more to educate than our younger kiddos. And so the formula accounts for that if you're a pre-K through 12 school versus a district that might be only elementary. After determining your foundation budget, they determine an equitable local contribution and how much of that foundation budget should be paid for by each city and town's property tax based on the relative wealth of the community. And historically, Barnstable has had most of the funding coming from the local contribution versus Chapter 70 because of the property values and median income to a lesser extent. The remainder is funded by Chapter 70 aid. The target was initially set in 1993 through the Education Reform Act as the minimum level necessary to provide the adequate education. It's been dramatically reset with the Student Opportunity Act, and Barnstable's foundation budget has increased 11.84%. So what they're saying is that based on your student enrollment and some of your demographic shifts, the minimum amount to adequately educate students in Barnstable has increased and has increased quite a bit. The reason for this has to do with the way in which the Foundation Budget Review Commission determined funding ought to be increased through the foundation budget and then subsequently Chapter 70. The Foundation Budget Review Commission took this up in 2015 and made recommendations to increase funding and increase the foundation budget for the increased costs associated with education for economically disadvantaged students, guidance and psychological services, health insurance and fixed costs, students with disabilities, their out-of-district tuition, and English learners. The required local contribution, the question that the state asks is how much can Barnstable afford to pay towards the foundation budget? Again, as I noted, they determine key factors, including the local effort from property wealth, local effort from income, and municipal revenue growth factor. Historically, target aid was relatively low, where 82.5% was coming from the town taxes and 17.5% was coming from Chapter 70. But with the Student Opportunity Act, that is shifting the percentage a little bit. And I'll share a summary demonstrating that Student Opportunity Act kind of changes that formula where 29.28% preliminarily coming from state aid versus 17.5%. The remainder, as I noted, comes from Chapter 70, state aid. And this is a summary chart based on the governor's budget, which she released March 1st. So our enrollment in Barnstable is increasing 2.1%. As I noted, the foundation budget is increasing by 8.9 million or 11.84%. And the required district contribution going up 5.1%. The big story here as it relates to the Student Opportunity Act is 6 million in Chapter 70 aid coming in, which is an increase of 32%. Again, the spirit of the Student Opportunity Act is to support the increased costs associated with those 5 factors that I just noted. And this is the largest increase for any community in the state. That is largely due to how our enrollment trends have shifted in recent years. And the red arrow is pointing to a big bump in students who qualify as economically disadvantaged both last year and this year. We are about 61% of our students qualify. That is 185% of the federal poverty level. That accounts one of the largest ways in which we have qualified for additional Chapter 70 aid. We all have also seen an increase in our English learners, and our population has increased a little bit here in Barnstable. So all of those have combined together to increase our Chapter 70 funding proposed by this 32%. I do anticipate that I don't foresee that the legislature, when they come out with the Senate budget or the House budget, and then I don't see any change there. The legislature and the governor for a couple of years, even with the transition in the governorship, they've been very much on the same page with respect to funding the Student Opportunity Act. So FY24 represents year 3 of a 6-year implementation of the Student Opportunity Act. And so we anticipate, and from what I'm hearing at the state level, they are continuing to fund a stabilization account to be able to fund future years of the Student Opportunity Act. We submitted an initial 3-year spending plan to the Department of Education in fiscal year 21. And we provide annual amendments each spring to account for expenditures on these evidence-based programs. And we'll submit a new 3-year spending plan to DESE in the fall. Chris, would you mind jumping in and sharing at a high level the proposed funding sources for this budget?
Sure. So to the far right is what we're projecting overall for the general fund budget. At the bottom, you'll see there 82,761,867. So that's almost entirely made up of general fund revenues based on the 60-40 cost sharing agreement that the town has used for some years. In addition to that, we've got 2 main offsets. The first is our circuit breaker, which is just over $2 million, which we are receiving this year, but we'll appropriate that toward next year's budget. The next offset we have is our school choice funds, which we are targeting using $600,000 for next year based on our projected enrollment. And given that the budget that's been submitted this year is balanced at this point, there is no school savings being needed to balance the budget or to fund the priorities that the superintendent has mentioned.
Chris, if I could ask a question, the circuit breaker, what is that about?
The circuit breaker is for costs for our special needs students. There's a formula that the state has that provides funding, relief, funding support to all communities for special needs, special education costs. And so the state calculates this based on our October 1 enrollment and provides it to communities in that fiscal year. We're allowed to use that for the next following fiscal year budget as an offset. Some districts use it in the current year, but a lot of other districts will just appropriate it towards the next year's budget.
All right, thanks.
Chris, does the circuit breaker students, are they incorporated into this Student Operating Act as well?
They are.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I thought they were, yeah.
Yeah, so part of the Student Opportunity Act, in addition to providing for additional Chapter 70, and I will note that the additional Chapter 70 is for a small number of communities like Barnstable. I want to say it's something under 25, between 20 and 25 communities. The rest of the communities in the state don't have that same level of need. But the Student Opportunity Act does take into consideration some other cost pressures that all communities are facing, one of which is with respect to escalating costs of special education, particularly out of district tuitions. So the circuit breaker funding does not cover all of our special education costs, but there's a threshold around which we get reimbursed for more costly placements or more costly services. And the Student Opportunity Act has written into law fully funding the circuit breaker, which in years past has kind of fluctuated and hasn't always been fully supported. And so that is also another way in which we are benefiting with other districts.
So part of the special needs students are being are incorporated into the SOA.
Yes.
Okay,
This way,
thank
yeah.
you.
Question, this is Neil. Why do you bury the Chapter 70 funding in the general fund and not show it separately?
That's a great question. So the Chapter 70 funding comes into the town. That is the way in which it comes in. And actually it covers all education. So it would also, income, the Barnstable Public Schools is not the only public school for the town. There is also, for example, the technical high school. So Chapter 70 comes in to the town and is considered as one of the revenue sources in addition to other revenue sources. And then based on the cost sharing agreement of 60-40, that gets kind of divided up according to that agreement that by town charter I have with the town manager, or the town manager has with me, and then we build the budget based on that.
And so, for instance, for fiscal year 2024, of the $6.1 million increase in Chapter 70, how much of that goes to the schools that you control?
I think it's hard for me to say exactly how much of that would go, but that comes in along with other revenues and is split 60-40. So like a rule of thumb might be 60%, but I would be kind of deferential to our director of finance with respect to all of that.
Yes, thank you for that question, Neil. So as the superintendent mentioned, all of the general fund revenue growth that we see on an annual basis is split 60-40 between municipal operations and school operations. And so after we deduct the increase in our fixed costs, we take the net revenue growth, and that's what we split 60-40. We don't say, okay, the school department gets every single dollar of Chapter 78 plus more property taxes. We look at the total revenue growth across all revenue categories and split that 60-40 after netting the cost increases for our fixed costs. Does that answer your
But does
question?
the Chapter 70 cover fixed costs as well as the different educational units?
There's a component within the Chapter 7 or the foundation budget formula that says, yeah, we need to spend so much money per student for fixed cost. And I think the superintendent had that slide up here. Health insurance and fixed costs right here. It's one of the categories that's within the foundation budget. So yeah, so Chapter 70 does take in, the Chapter 70 formula does take into account that we do incur costs for health insurance and other fixed type costs for running school operations. And so they have a factor built into the foundation budget to recognize that. And that's one of the areas that they've pointed out in the Student Opportunity Act is they were underfunding that in the past, and they increased the rates that we need to spend in that particular area to recognize the inflationary costs we've seen in health insurance and other fixed costs.
Thank you.
So just back to the summary, we're looking at 8.77% in salaries and wages, an increase of 3.19% in supplies and 3.19% in operating and contracted services for a total recommended appropriation of $82,761,867. The recommended budget by cost center is shown here. I'm not necessarily going to go through each line, but what Chris did is has taken all of the budgets for each of our cost centers and highlighted them here to show the percent change as well as the dollar value change across all of these cost centers. And then we also have our recommended budget by DESI function code. And so Chris has also created this graphic to show any changes in dollar amount and percent increase by DESI function code. I'm not going to go through all of these, but I'll highlight some of the themes which connect back to some previous slides. The first set of slides is around budget investments that have to do with salaries and wages. As I noted, there are a bunch of increases that are consistent with our multilingual learner program. So we have a half-time ESL teacher at our preschool, which is a new mandate from the state to provide ESL services with our youngest learners. We have a couple family and community liaisons proposed, which I had mentioned previously. This is where you're seeing those paraprofessionals and assistants for our youngest learners, and assistant principals, so that each K-3 would have a full-time assistant principal. I also looked at equity with respect to our counseling staff, and we have, I think, an inequitable situation with Centerville having fewer, and they have requested a social worker, which I'm supporting. Jumping down, we're also looking at some of our programming at our Community Innovation School. We are proposing to restore one of the positions there to a coaching position from a specialist position, which provides an opportunity to add a 0.8 science teacher. This also brings equity across our K-3 schools and brings explicit science instruction to all of our K-3 elementary schools with a specialist. Although it is grant funded and is not included in the operating budget, I did want to demonstrate ways in which we're looking to support and close achievement gaps, and to do so strategically. And so we have 2 interventionists proposed for the United Elementary School to support closing math and reading achievement gaps that students are experiencing in grades 4 or 5. We have a need for some additional special education staff, so there's a proposed paraprofessional at BUE. And later on down, actually it's probably on the next page, a special education teacher at the high school, as we have one of our classrooms of specialized programs serving students in a specialized program is expanding the number of students they have. And so to fully support all of their classes, we need an additional teacher there. I'm really excited about some of the opportunities at the intermediate school. We have a proposed world language and STEM teacher for the intermediate school. One of the things they're struggling with is providing students with enough electives and opportunities during the school day. And this really enhances the offerings that they have. Right now, we have some students taking 2 arts and two phys eds, even though that might not be the broad curriculum that we would want for students. They also have very high class sizes. I think world language and STEM at the intermediate school would be very, very attractive, particularly in this world of school choice that we have here on the Cape. So we're really excited about that. We talked about supporting ESL and creating a career pipeline. So we have a few ESL paraprofessionals within this budget that we're hoping to bring in as paraprofessionals and then grow into ESL teachers. The ESL department at the high school is the only department without a department head. So we're looking for some leadership there. We have a proposed bilingual counselor at the high school. We currently have 1 bilingual counselor, but the numbers would support a 2nd bilingual counselor. One of the things that Barnstable does a tremendous job of is providing for a continuum of services in special education. And you see the word foundations, you see Crossroads here. Both of those are some of our specialized programs. And there's, I think, a really important comment that I should be making about our specialized programs, which is that first. We provide these specialized programs because we have a cohort of students that we can serve. If we couldn't or didn't have this cohort, these students would be out of district. So from a value standpoint and an inclusive standpoint, we really welcome having the students remain in their community. It also is a cost savings ultimately that we're not paying out of district tuition, but are providing their services directly in their school community. But those classrooms are expanding and have needs. And so we have a recommendation or a request for a teacher and a paraprofessional in Crossroads, as well as a special educator elsewhere in the district. I'm sorry, elsewhere in the high school. We have a proposal here for an inventory clerk to make sure that we're responsible in terms of all of the technology that we've infused into the district. As I had noted, we have a proposal for 2 additional craftsmen to support our maintenance department. And I already had mentioned the community liaison.
If I can just ask a question about the grant funded column, are those grants that have been applied for, or have you already received those funds?
Those are funds that we already have. So that is actually at this point through the ESSER funding. We have ESSER funding that was part of the American Rescue Plan, specifically targeted to schools through the pandemic or post-pandemic now. And so that's where those positions currently reside.
Okay, thank you.
And we've already secured them. Yeah.
Okay.
In terms of operating increases, we have some curriculum materials, as I had noted previously, for preschool. We have, I'm going to skip the grant. These are also, anything that's grant funded here is also from money that's already been secured. But I wanted to kind of demonstrate that we're really thinking strategically. These are all of our needs, and we're thinking strategically about how we can support them. We have some additional support for MCAS preparation and some online classes that we do through the grant. We are looking to and have increased our athletic program with the involvement of unified sports. We have unified basketball and unified track, which is an extension of Special Olympics. And so those would be stipends for the coaches. Our high school is undergoing accreditation that happens once every 10 years. So the accreditation process is kicking off now, and we have a visit to plan for next year, and this also would support faculty and staff doing some additional work towards the high school's reaccreditation process. The high school has expanded its alternative learning programs, and we are looking to do some student recognitions. So proposal for additional supplies at the high school. I mentioned translation and interpretation services that appears twice, one on this slide for special education and one on the next slide. We're looking to make sure that we are funding professional development for our faculty and staff coming in new into the district. This, to me, is an area that we've been underfunding. And so I've got a few lines here to support professional development, one of which is in the special education department. The Google Workspace is increasing. And so we have increased costs. And in this next section, these are the inflationary costs that we're anticipating. Google Workspace, gas and diesel, out of district transportation, increased need for bus monitors. And then we increased maintenance by about 10%. So contracted services, the maintenance reserve, custodial supplies, vehicle leasing. I have reserved some funds for somebody to help us with long-term facilities planning. Once we get our facilities conditions assessment and a demographic report, we can do some longer-term facilities planning, which was one of the big areas that emerged from my entry plan as something that we need to be working on and planning for long-term. We are shoring up our management of contracts. I'm proposing professional development for diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging as we grow into a more diverse school and school community. Mentor stipends in the operating budget to account for our new educators and a need. It's a mandate that we have to provide them with mentoring and an induction experience. Increasing our assessment line due to cost increases. Course reimbursement, we're seeing quite a bit of, I think there was a little bit of a lull during the pandemic where our educators weren't taking as much professional coursework. We're seeing more of that, so looking to increase that. Licensing cost increases, earmarking professional development funds for the assistant superintendent's office around curriculum development. Testing and assessment supplies going up in costs. We have a grant that's expiring, so we're shifting it to another grant to support a nurse at the Family and Community Engagement Center. Increasing interpreter lines and text and materials need to increase for the EL department with the number of students that have increased. And so that is a summary of the operating requests at a total of $793,639.
Sarah, I have a question, and it's really not a financial question, but shows my ignorance. My kids are long since finished public school. With the influx of English language learners, how are they accommodated in a classroom? Say you have a 10th grade science classroom. Do you have children in that class who are learning English or are not completely fluent, but they're mainstreamed with the English speaking kids, are they not? How do you deliver the interpreting or translating services to those children?
Sure, that's a great question. So Massachusetts has a sheltered English immersion model, which means that the students are learning English through their content areas, and they're also explicitly taught English by an ESL teacher. And it looks a little different at different grade levels and also depends on how proficient the student is in English. So our beginner students, everybody gets assessed, and our beginner students have more time with the ESL teacher explicitly learning English, and there's less dependence on them learning English in the midst of a content class. And as the students get more proficient in the English language, they have less time with the ESL teacher and more time with their content teachers. And the content teachers have specific training on how to break their content down into a way that's understandable for somebody who is learning English. And so it's really kind of fluid and adaptive, and depends on where the student is in terms of their command of the English language. At the high school, we have some very specific, very dedicated courses in content areas for our English learners, particularly those that are beginners or new to the country. And then as they get more proficient, they become more mainstreamed into other content classes.
So put another way, there'd be a special science class for the kids whose English is not so strong, and then eventually they would move up into the mainstream English class. Is that English speaking class for science? Is that the way it would work?
Yes. Kristen, do you want to add anything?
Sure. Yes. So as Sarah outlined, we have, I'll call it like a pathway for our beginners, our intermediate, and again, that's how they're assessed, and it puts them at a level. And depending on the various levels, the courses they'll be taking are the language of science and the language of math. And then as they progress, they'll get to the language of social studies, and that prepares them to move into the general content classes. So it really is scaffolded to build their language so that they can access the content curriculum.
Okay, thank you.
Sarah, I've got a question about the enrollment and the achievement gap. During the pandemic, a lot of students decided to be homeschooled. And so I'm wondering, has the enrollment been restored to our pre-COVID numbers? And the second question is the achievement gap. The previous superintendent indicated to us that there was a very large need for remedial programs for the summer. And I wonder if you could address both of those.
Sure. So our enrollment, I'm just pulling up some actual numbers as we talk. I just did a presentation to the Citizens Leadership Academy last Tuesday. So so that presentation should be near at hand with our actual numbers, but we have seen a recovery of our enrollment to pre-COVID numbers. We're still down, from 10 years ago. There was a decline that occurred and is occurring all across the Cape. And actually in many places in Massachusetts, there's a decrease in student enrollment. We did see a more, acute drop during the pandemic year. Last year it was up a little bit, and this year it's up even further. And so we are, I think we're above where we were in 1920.
2020, you mean?
And yeah, so I'm just grabbing that, the enrollment numbers. So we're in March, we're at 4,881. And in 2021, we were 4,713.
Mm-hmm.
So we've recovered a bit.
Now about the achievement gap, because so many had stayed home, they obviously were not up to speed. So how are we dealing with that one?
We're doing a lot to deal with the achievement gap and what I would call the skills gap. I think we're seeing, varied skills in both math and reading in particular. And we're addressing it both in our classrooms on a day-to-day basis, as well as through some of those special programs that you had talked about. Kristen, I think, leads the way with that from her office, teaching and learning. So I'll kind of kick it over to her.
Yes, so that's another area that we've received a lot of grant funding for summer programming, summer enrichments. And in the last few years, and including this year, we've been running in particular math academies over the school breaks. So both February and April vacation, we have one coming up in a couple weeks. They've been quite well attended. And it really is, the Department of Education has put out the funding with the specific goal of some gap closing on those key skills for students. Math has been the focus, and then in the summer they do run a grant for both a reading and a math academy. So we've done that as well. I'm not sure if the funding will be available this summer. They haven't released any information on that yet.
And do we have enough faculty to staff these summer programs and other remedial programs?
So we haven't had any difficulty staffing the vacation programs or the summer program in particular. And also through the ESSER grants, a portion of that funding is earmarked for gap closing measures, which includes summer. And so we've been running some summer enrichments, and so those are connected with content, but I would say using teacher, I don't want to say hobbies, but like their passion projects as the baseline of that, as the foundation. So if someone's really interested in gardening, then they develop an enrichment program around gardening that's connected to math or literacy. So because of that and the nature of it, we haven't had any difficulty staffing that either.
Oh, that's really great.
Yeah. And we'll be doing that again this summer.
Thank you. Does anybody thank you very much for your presentation. Do any of our members have any questions about this operating budget? Neil?
Yes, I guess one of the topics that wasn't covered, what additional cost efficiencies have you been able to bake into the next year plan?
We do have some changes and reductions from last year's budget. We have some one-time expenses that are coming off of the books, including some text at the high school. There was some supplies for one of our business clubs. There was a swing at the Centerville Elementary School that was a one-time expense that is coming out, and another another piece of supplies at the high school. And then in terms of salaries and wages, we have a reduction of a library assistant from 0.8 to 0.5 at the Centerville Elementary School. And with the addition of the science teacher at BCIS, a reduction of our instructional technology teacher from a 1.0 to a 0.6.
Thank you. Does anybody else have any questions or comments?
You, in the very beginning of your presentation, I think you cited a 20% population of your English language learners. Is that a trend up, or is it consistent, or where is that going?
Thank you. That has been a trend up. So this year we're at 21.2%, and last year we were 15.9%. Prior to that, we were 12.8%. So it has been a steady increase, and the percentage has doubled since 2019. That percent was about 10% in 2019.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I had a question relating to that. Earlier in your presentation, you had said that one of the factors in the increased funding from the state was that the population had increased. How do you define population? Because you went on to say when somebody else asked that actually the school population had decreased. So when you said population, what does that figure represent?
We have 130 more students this year than last year.
Okay.
So it's decreased, since 2019, 2020. But has increased since last year. So that
would represent why the increase in the contribution from the state.
Yeah.
And then yeah, that's a dramatic increase as the English as a second language. And you'd also mentioned about the classes being a little bit crowded at the BIS. I have a student, one of my daughters at the BIS, and she describes, the folks who, it's so difficult to come in at that age and not speaking English. She says it's really hard for them, really hard. And I have students at the United School, and it's a little easier. They also had kids when they were in the K-3 that came in that didn't speak English. So it really is something else. And all my children have said they seem to do very well, and that a lot of times the students in the class help. And that's huge to have the students in the class that are bilingual and fluent and helping. And but the BIS seems like a real challenge. That seems like, do you break it down by school age where you're getting that increase, that dramatic increase in the second language learners? Because obviously the later you come into a school, the harder that's going to be. Do you have that broken down? I'm just curious because I've experienced it through my kids, through all of their grades.
I don't have that data directly in front of me, but it's a great point, because I do think that it certainly hasn't. There's so many reasons why it's a little different with the older students than the younger ones. We know kind of neurologically students are programmed to learn language at the elementary level around the age of 7. And so they're just primed for language acquisition. Whereas at the high school level or at the intermediate school level, it just becomes a little bit harder, and the content's harder. It's more complicated and sophisticated. And so I don't have those numbers, but I will look into that and I can get that back to you through maybe Mark Milne. We can get that information to you because it would be interesting to know about and to look at. I will say I appreciated you talking about the successful outcomes of the students. You know, many of our students are doing quite well, and we have the seal of biliteracy at the high school. So our multi-language learners, as well as students for whom English is their first language, who take a world language and become literate, they can graduate with this extra credential of being literate in two languages. And I think it's something that we really ought to celebrate and be proud of.
You know, it's amazing. I love it. I love it. And, you know, again, my 7th grader, you know, it's a little bit more of a distraction in her classes, again, because you're dealing with an older cohort that don't have the language skills. My younger ones, it's almost a fun thing to help to, you know, bring those people into the classroom. And I'm also, I love in your budget that you're really pursuing development and, you know, kind of encouraging progression, because everybody wants to progress within a system. And that's fantastic in terms of, you know, allowing people a ladder up. So I love that. But I would like to see maybe a connection between where those English as a second learners and the application of your resources. Just to be curious to me. Thank you.
Do any of our members have any more questions or comments? Okay. Well, all of us really appreciate your explanations to us, Sarah, Kristen, and Chris. Now, if we have any follow-up questions about the budget, whom should we contact?
I think, go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, I was gonna say you can send them to me and I'll work with Sarah on getting the answers for you.
Okay. Because we're getting ready to look at this more seriously, and I know that whoever's assigned to the school will have follow-up questions. Well, thank you guys all for coming. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going, because Chuck has a limited time with our committee today, I'm going to skip down and take up his organization of the operating budget subcommittee so he can get that organized. And then we'll come back to the CIP subcommittee report. So Chuck?
In no particular order, I tried to work a timeline out in my head, and Mark, correct me if I make a mistake with any of this. The report is due, let's say, May 15th. And
Right.
I think the last CFAC meeting before that due date is May 8th. And so if we present our report to CFAC on May 8th, then I think we need to have a draft done, you know, somewhere around the beginning of May. So my thinking is to have a couple of meetings in April. The first one after we've each taken a shot at the sections we have, and the second one to refine what we've come up with in aggregate and talked about in the first meeting. So working backwards, after this, we'll start with a couple of subcommittee meetings in April, and then roll things up and present it to CFAC early May before the report is due in mid-May. Does that sound reasonable to people?
That sounds good. That normally works. I think if we divide it all up, we can begin to look at our respective parts of the budget.
Yes, and
Yeah.
that's the gory part. So I got the easy part out of the way.
Yeah.
So
Now here comes the assignments.
yes. So I would love not to have to do assignments just as a premise. But I assume that people looked at last year's document that I think Mark was kind enough to send around. And so as I read through it, there was an introduction, methodology, overview, and an open budget section. And because so many of the people on our in our subcommittee this year are relatively new to CFAC. I'm happy to take those first 4 and just do my best with them. But then we get to the substantive stuff. So there's the revenue section, the general fund section, the school section, DPW, the CWMP, police, enterprise funds, fixed costs. And last year we had a section called future financial needs.
Right.
That I may want to talk about renaming, but I like the content of the section. I also think, as I read last year's report, and I'll take this one on as well, that it'd be nice if we could have some kind of closing comment in the report and not just kind of drop it by thanking Mark for everything he does for us. Not that we won't thank Mark, but to put more around that. So and this is the only assigning I'm going to do, I think Neil is already a schools volunteer. Am I wrong, Neil? Tell me if I'm wrong.
No, I'm happy to do that. I've done a lot to try to get up to speed just because it's the largest expense.
Right.
Yeah, I think Neil has done a lot to familiarize himself with the ins and outs of the school budget.
So if that's true, then for the rest of the people on the committee, we have 8 sections: revenue, general fund, DPW, CWMP, police, enterprise funds, and fixed costs, and future financial needs. So I will ask those of you on the subcommittee if you have any particular interest. And the only prefatory comment I'll have here is I am relatively new to this. I'm not as new as you, but I'm relatively new to this group. And I think my first year, I maybe took police and something else. And much like I'm sure Neil has done, you just do it. I mean, there's no magic to it. You just read everything you can read, and we'll probably, Mark, I'm guessing, interview 1 or 2 more groups over the course of the next month, and you'll gather information there as well. So I would say you don't need to have a particular expertise or I have no background in police work, and yet I did the police section. So I would say if there's something of interest to you, put your hand up, and we'll go from there. So,
well, what I will say is last year I did CWMP, enterprise funds, and fixed costs. And so I will do, and I've done most of the others. So I will fill in after our newer members select their areas.
and I think that's great, and I'll do the same thing. Just because I volunteered to do the intro and the end,
and that's pretty pro forma.
Yeah. So I assume I'll do 1 or 2 of the funds too, and I'll pick last, and I'm happy to do any of them. So
no, I get to pick last. Yeah.
Do any of the other committee members have any particular interest in any of the sections that we talked about?
I'd be happy to do police and or DPW.
Well, maybe you can do both.
I certainly can.
These are just budgets, so it's not the capital.
Correct.
Right.
This is just the budget stuff. Okay, Chris. So if I could type in pencil and to show that I'm an old guy, I'll say I'll put your name in pencil on those, and we'll see how else we do.
Excellent.
I saw Jackie here somewhere.
Yeah, I will do general fund and CWMP.
Wow. Okay.
Jackie, you are ambitious. That is awesome.
Yes, you really are.
All righty.
And the general fund?
Yeah.
Yes.
So I'll do fixed costs.
All right.
And I guess that leaves enterprise funds.
And I'll take revenue. I think I did that last year, so
You did do revenue last year.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that.
Enterprise funds.
You're going to do that, Lillian?
I'll be happy to. I'll be happy to do fixed costs and enterprise funds.
That's good.
Okay.
And I will take a shot since I'll try, maybe since I'll try to blend it into the closing. I'll take a shot at what we called future financial needs.
Yeah, we normally, if you remember what we did last year, we set a sort of a little brainstorming session at the end to
Yes.
figure out what all that was about. And then we collected all of our ideas and then put it together.
Okay, well, that was a heck of a lot easier than I thought it was going to be. So thank you, everyone.
Okay, and you can tell us when you want to meet in April
And Chris, you're now in ink, by the way, just to confirm.
Excellent. Sounds good.
It's not excellent, but you're a good man, so thank you.
Happy to do it.
Mark or Lillian, I'll defer to you. Especially given the newness of some of the people writing some of these healthy sections, should we have people in or ask people to come in and do the same kind of overview we just did at our next meeting?
we certainly can. Of course, CWMP is a fairly straightforward budget, as is the general fund.
Right.
Now, we could bring in DPW and police. We did that.
I think that would be
last year.
helpful for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, so why don't we try to bring them in? Let's see,
When is the next meeting?
we could bring them in on April 10th.
April 10th. Okay.
April 10th. How about that?
Sounds good.
Okay.
And then I'm trying to do calendars here.
Fixed costs and enterprise funds are fairly straightforward.
Yeah.
Now, what we normally did, and I just because I've been the chair for so long, is that we had a scribe. Both subcommittees had a scribe who was somebody who put together the different pieces.
Right.
Yeah, and served as the scribe as we discussed it. We had that also for CIP, but Hector was a one-man band this time, so he had all of that on his shoulders. So we could do that, and if you're a good scribe, Chuck, we could do that, or we could have another person do it.
No,
But
I candidly, Lillian, had assumed that I was going to be the scribe, so I have no.
Okay, but that basically simplifies the process.
Yep.
Yeah.
So happy to do that. And so if we have assuming they can do it, if we have the DPW and police in on the 10th, then maybe we can meet as a group early the following week.
Okay.
We'll ask people to do a write-up prior to that. If you get me whatever you do, I'll roll it up, get it out to everybody. We'll set a meeting, go over it, edit it, and then sometime before a next meeting, I'm not sure which one yet, because we have a little time. The nice thing is we're doing this early enough that we have a little time to then put a semi-final draft together that will hopefully all be comfortable with, and we can run past the full CFAC for comment and approval.
Right. That sounds great. So you are so you're aiming for May 15th, basically.
Yeah, if we had the write-ups by the 15th, we could have a meeting early, mid the following week, and then I can do my scribing thing and make the edits, get them back out, and still meet our multiple deadlines here.
We need to take our final draft to the full committee for review and approval. So we want to try to get that on May 8th.
Yes, I think May 8th makes sense.
Okay.
Yep. And Mark, that'll meet the May 15 deadline, I assume, because it gives us a little time to finalize edits and.
Okay.
Okay, let's do that then.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Clarification.
That was really efficient. So Mark, can we get DPW and police on the 10th?
I will ask them tomorrow if they're
Thank you.
available. They probably,
Thank you.
I'm sure they will be, and you'll be interviewing me for the other sections
We certainly will. You are our main guy. Thank you, Chuck.
Neil had a question.
Yeah, first draft is due to you by when?
Preferably, I'm just thinking of practicality here. Like end of day on the 14th.
14th of April?
Yep, because that would give me the weekend to put everything together and for us to meet
That's fine.
early middle next week.
I just work really well with deadlines.
Good.
They concentrate the mind wonderfully.
Yes.
Thanks.
So I can be on vacation until the 13th.
That's right. That's when I'll be writing mine.
We know you better than that, Neil. Okay. Anything else you want to talk about on that operating budget subcommittee, Chuck? I
do not, Lillian. I'm good.
Okay, well, thank you. We're well organized. And now we can go back to the CIP budget report. Now the members of our subcommittee report for the new members are Wendy, Chuck, Hector, and me. Hector guided the committee's process, and he conscientiously made sure that every part of the report was discussed, it was accurate, and he edited it to our satisfaction. Now, Hector was very ably multitasking during our meetings. He guided our discussions. He volunteered to do follow-ups of our suggestions. He made changes on the spot as best he could. In other words, he did a great job of juggling all these tasks. So you have the CIP report, our draft in front of you. So I'm going to try to simplify our process tonight by doing a little tag team with Hector. I'll get the input from members and comments, and Hector can concentrate on entering the changes so that all of us will be able to see them. So if that's okay, I'm going to proceed.
So should I share my screen to start out?
That'll be great.
Okay, so Mark, how do I do that?
Well, you have
Share screen.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to share screen
Okay.
now. CIP report. Share. Okay. Can people see that?
Yeah, there we go.
Okay.
Now, okay,
go,
this
go
all
up
right.
to the top. Okay.
This semifinal draft is presented to all of us in the full committee to specifically get input from our new members, Jackie, Neil, and Chris, and to get your suggestions as well as those of the regular subcommittee members, with the hope that we'll have the final report for review and approval by our next meeting. We have always found that new sets of eyes have always improved our work. So I'm going to suggest that Wendy, Chuck, Hector, and I answer any questions about the parts that we wrote. So that being said, let's go through the report section by section and get your comments. The first section is an introduction and description of the methodology, and it was done by Chuck. So Jackie, Neil, and Chris, I invite you to give us your comments. Chris? You're muted.
I said me first, huh?
Yeah, you first. This is pretty.
Comments as far on the introduction? You want comments on, or, I mean, I think it's pretty comprehensive.
We're going to go section by section.
We're going to go section by section.
Yeah.
And if you have any comments or suggested changes, now's your time to do it. And Hector is our scribe.
Okay.
And
On the introduction, I mean, I don't really have any changes I would make to it. I think it's straightforward in describing what the report's going to be about and what the process is. questions that need to be answered as far as the projects and how they contribute. I mean, I think that's all pretty good the way it's written.
Great.
Right.
Neil,
The
do you
number-
have,
the num-
Neil, do you have any comments?
Yeah, I got hung up on the last paragraph of page 2,
Okay,
Okay.
where
This one?
it says the recommended approval level was 67.6 million, which seems to be correct with the next sentence in the outline. But then I hit this, that table doesn't equal 67.6. I think that's one generation behind. It shows 106.6 million in 2024, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, Mark, had you looked over, I think you're the one, or did Chuck, did you insert these numbers? I can't recall.
yeah, these numbers were presented by Mark, I think.
Yes, but they were done, I believe, before Mr. L's cut the general fund dramatically. I think the general fund, as in the last paragraph, has gone down to 33 million, right? Excuse me, 12 million.
Yeah, the general fund is actually 12.3 million.
Right. Not 50.32.
Yeah, so if we go, yeah, you're right.
So I think that's one thing. There's another thing that I don't know that I have the right numbers, but looking back at 2023 and 2022, those also had totals that were more in the $50 million range, which brings up an issue of which really Mark could counsel us on, I think, is the funding for 2024 that was approved was considered the most that was affordable. Am I correct, Mark?
Mark, you must be muted. We don't hear you.
I don't know where he is.
Okay, well, let me go on. I think a big issue to me, as you know, is 2025.
Yeah,
How are we going to quadruple spending? Is that realistic? We're going to go from 60 million to 285. I imagine that somebody's going to have to start looking at the 2025 numbers sooner than later, because, and Mark could speak to this, but if 50 or if the original 100 million this year wasn't affordable, how are they going to deal with next year would be my question. That makes sense?
yes. So
does.
are you suggesting that we pose that question in one of our in our narrative?
Yes, I think especially if we add 2022, 2023 to so people can see the trend of how much capital has been spent per year, and then point out that, as I understood it, 2024 was cut back. Enterprise was diminished, $1.5 million difference.
Right.
CWMP was 100% approved. Everything that came out to get this thing back to the $60 million level came out of the general fund.
Right.
What's going to happen next year, I think, is and that's been the trend. We've been spending until we got the big slug for CWMP in 2024. It's been running around $50 million. When that all of a sudden went from, I think, 5 last year to 33, it all had to come out of something else. It wasn't considered affordable, I thought was the explanation.
Mark just said,
Yep.
texted me that he lost his internet. I think I heard him come back in. Mark, are you back?
I forced him out.
Lost my internet. Thanks. Sorry about that.
I think those are good points that you make, and I think if you want to begin working on some wording on that, Neil, and get back with us on that.
Before we do, we ask Neil to do something. Neil, can you just recapitulate for Mark your question about 2024?
Yes.
Mark, I don't know when you lost it, but Neil started off by saying fiscal 2024 in the paragraph above the table, Els recommends 67.6 million in capital projects, but that doesn't scan with the table down below.
Yeah, the table down below illustrates the
Submissions.
submissions, total submissions for all departments. It's not the recommendations.
Right. So not what Els has recommended.
I
So
think
Okay.
probably we need to have a title at the top of that table to indicate that those are the submissions.
I
Right.
think I had the same issue in my section also.
Yeah,
And so mine may need the same description.
Yeah, I think-
But I think
because
Neil
otherwise
has,
it is confusing.
yeah, I
The
think
last
Neil's gonna,
sentence in that paragraph above the table says that the following table
Yeah.
presents a 5-year rolled up summary of town department aggregate capital submissions.
well, maybe we should put that sentence right above the table.
Or why don't we just put down above the table, there you go, 5-year aggregate capital submissions. And just take away that sentence at the bottom of page 2. There you go.
You don't think it's instructive to show that actually general fund is only going to get 12 million in the table so that they don't get confused?
Well, Paul is on the line. And so your perspective might be helpful. Because you guys will be reading this.
Right, and I should add that we also read the entire capital book. Well, we don't read it all, but we scan it. And so some of that information is in that book as well. And the presentation is often of the requests. It might be nice though to tie what actually is funded with this table of what's requested. And, that might get more complicated to say that, of the requested funds, the enterprise funds, it's close to 95%, I think. But general fund requests is a much smaller percentage. I mean, I don't know if that's valuable if that would be interesting information to convey. I mean, the chart itself, though, is sort of complete as is because you're looking at a 5-year CIP and the types of capital needs that we have in the town. And I don't think you want to lose that sort of magnitude of capital needs. But I think Neil's correct. We're not we can't afford to fund those capital needs on a year-to-year basis. So again, that might need to be in another place.
Yeah,
So,
I think the graphical challenge is that mixing recommendations with submissions,
right?
In one sense is informative because it gives the reader a feel for what's actually being spent as opposed to asked for, but it can also create confusion because it's apples and oranges from a presentation standpoint.
Mark, why was the general fund reduced so much? I think that's the real issue that I'm most concerned about.
Sure. Well, limited resources don't allow us to fund all of those submissions. So I think this indicates about 25% of the submissions are what we're able to afford. And that's typical in any year.
I know next year is a different year, but will that same issue come up next year when somebody comes through with 285 million?
Yes, if you go back, if you look at our past capital plans for the past 10 years, this has been the case. Yes, we do not have the resources necessary to fully fund every single request within the general fund.
So maybe we should just say that someplace.
Yeah, I think that would clarify it a lot.
Is it pretty consistent that roughly 25% of those submissions are funded, or does it vary significantly year by year?
It varies year by year. We'd have to go back for the past several years and take a look at that and come up with those percentages.
I think it's fair to say that general fund projects have been pressured because of the needs of the CWMP, which is
Yes,
a mandated program.
and I guess, you know, if part of the CFAX thing is to raise concerns that everyone who is the audience for this report needs to look at, my concern is that 2025, we can't start preparing for that too soon, given this would be 4 times as much as the town has ever put into capital.
Right.
Or am I just an alarmist?
No, I think you're being a realist.
I think that the question you posed is very appropriate and we should address it. Now, going back to that paragraph in page 2.
Yeah, so you
I
see,
think- Yeah,
go ahead, Lillian.
I think we need to tighten up that sentence a little bit, your first sentence.
Mm-hmm.
I think that you could say that there was a total capital submissions of 106.6 million for fiscal 2024. Yeah, for fiscal 2024.
Yeah, we've already got it in the front part of the sentence there.
No, yeah, that's fine.
In
Yeah,
fiscal 2024, there were total capital submissions of
Yeah,
106
well,
million.
if you're gonna do that, then you take the comma away from 24.
Okay.
Okay,
And you're missing of between submissions and the dollar amount.
Yeah, good. Okay, thank you.
yeah, of. There you go. Yeah, that's clean.
It is, but I still think we need to somehow get to Neil and Mark's points, which are that as in prior years, and as will be the case in future years, the town manager, due to limited budget resources, has recommended only a portion of those submissions be funded. Something like that.
Do we? No, of the submissions, a portion of what is submitted.
Okay.
Yeah,
Does Chuck, does that sort of bridge the issue?
Yeah, that captures the spirit. I mean, Hector, if
yeah,
we want
I
to do
think that's good. Yeah,
wording offline, that's fine. But
okay,
yes.
Okay.
okay. Then after this year, you can take away the comma.
All right.
Good.
Okay.
Yeah, now that's clean.
I like commas occasionally, but anyway, we'll go with that.
Do we
Yeah.
want something after the table saying that there's a concern about the dramatic increase for fiscal year 2025 and the feasibility of that?
Yes, I
That's-
think we
that's-
can. No, at the end of
After the chart?
after the
table?
chart. I can
Yeah.
think, say CFAC expresses concern.
Okay. I'm just gonna put some words down here and then I'll wordsmith it afterwards. So Neil, your point is, I think you said 2020, we can't start worrying about 2025 too soon.
Well, Neil, what do you say?
Yes, that's the only issue that I think
So what-
would add
what-
some value.
So what would I put in this sentence to summarize your concern? Just below the table.
Well, it's going up by
But
100%.
I guess I would, the way I was thinking about it is for the past 3 years, we've been spending $50 to $60 million. And in
I'm sorry,
2024,
50 to 60, I'm sorry.
yeah, and I don't have the exact, I found a lot of numbers, but I'm not sure they're exactly right, because CWMP was not broken out in 2022 that I could find.
No, it wasn't because it wasn't,
I think it was in the general fund at that time.
yeah, we didn't have a capital.
Well, let me just interject a comment, Neil. So it struck you that L's only funded 67 of 106 million in submissions. So the issue is going to be for next year.
Concern.
The number, the total submissions, 24 months in advance, but be that as it may, 24 months in advance, total submissions have doubled to 285 million.
Right.
And
Right.
and so the issue is,
Concern about the increase.
How will the, I guess the question I might ask is, not that it can be answered right now, but if we've been spending at 50 to 60 or 67, and that's been constrained by affordability, why will next year not be the same problem?
right.
Well, maybe Mark can comment on any additional funding projections that may go down in the future plan. I don't know if that's appropriate.
I presume that no one actually has an answer now. I just think that someone should be made aware that they need to ask the question.
Did we lose Mark again?
I think we may have lost it again. He just wrote me.
You probably went to dinner.
Well,
so-
I assume, the CWMP cost are dramatically increased year after year after year, or in certain years.
Well,
In
2025.
2025 looks like a particularly large year,
Yeah.
although some of the other years are significant as well. But, is there a plan to try and finance some of those projects in a certain way? I don't know if there's, a debt override, or, I don't know what the real plan is going forward, or what the options are to finance them.
I think what we could, I'm gonna just throw this out.
Okay.
We express concern about the significant increase in the number of projected submissions, about the significant increase and size of the projected submissions for fiscal 25 and the town's ability to fund them.
Just
does
leave it
that
at that.
Yeah,
Neil, does
how
that?
does that
Yeah,
sound?
I think that's a good way to put it.
Chris, you okay with that?
Yeah, I think that sums it up.
How about you, Jackie?
Did you want to use Neil's suggestion?
No, I
that-
mean, we're really only talking about this one sentence right now.
No, included in the sentence that they had just been funding approximately half of it before. So the percentage that was funded before, saying that there was not enough money, but now it has significantly increased. How do they propose to do that? I don't know. I was just thinking that comparing what they were not able to do and before, maybe, pardon me, maybe a good way to state that that's the concern.
Yeah.
Well,
I-
I think they always request for a significant amount of submissions. This is just the process. And then it gets called down to a much lower amount because they realize they don't have the funding for it. So the process kind of is they submit everything, they review everything, they rank everything. And then Mark Else prepares a final submission of what his requests are after that whole process.
Right.
So in the interim, the amounts could be significantly higher. But after the whole culling process takes place, it's much lower because obviously there isn't the money to fund everything.
So what you're saying, Wendy, which is probably accurate when you think about budget processes, is that the out years. Okay, so should we get back to where we were? I thought
Yes.
we were almost done with that first section. Neil, you make.
Well, we've got that one, we have that one sentence we have to take care of.
Okay, so let me share my screen again.
Okay.
Okay. Now I'm sharing. All right. So we added this sentence here. See if I can express this concern.
Mhm.
And I think that, you know, we're just putting it out there. There's not much more than we can say about it. I mean, there is a lot more we could say about it, but you know, I would think this does the trick, unless someone else
I
has
think
a suggestion.
I agree. I think that catches the idea of what we want to say. We don't need to get into the details of it.
Okay.
Okay.
Mark, do you have any comment on that one sentence?
This sentence here, Mark. Did we lose Mark again? No, he is. There's Mark.
No.
So this is the sentence we added. I'm not sure where we lost you, Mark, but we added a sentence up here. We have total submissions of 106 million. As in prior years, the town is only able to fund a portion of what is submitted. This year, Els recommends approval. And then
We had a little conversation about the submissions versus the actual requests.
Yeah.
And then afterwards, you know, Neil was extremely concerned about 2025 because it is a big increase.
Yeah.
So does that represent that one sentence after the table? Does that represent a good concern, or should we add anything else to that?
Well, it's historically been the case for us. Like I said before, if we go back and look at the past several years, we can only fund the fraction of the projects that are submitted for. And so we end up pushing them out to subsequent years. And that's the trend will continue unless we find additional resources to throw into the capital program, which we have. But our capital program has grown substantially with the addition of the CWMP. So it was a challenge before the CWMP, and it's gotten even more challenging now with that program.
Yeah, well, that seems to be the area of the most growth. I guess going forward, we just experience the same thing unless there's another source of funding that we don't know about.
Mhm.
Do you all mind if I just want to scroll ahead to this, but this to see what's in the 135 million
Yeah,
in fiscal
yeah.
25. And there it is, Route 28. And then nitrogen removal project, headworks improvements, and Finney's Lane. So Mark, what you're saying is these projects, one or more of these projects may get deferred next year when we're in the, when Els is trying to make his choices for fiscal
No,
25.
these are CWMP projects. What I was referring to were just the general fund submissions,
Right,
which is everything else. Not, excludes enterprise funds and CWMP. General
Right.
fund submissions were about, I believe in the table said 50 million.
right.
Yeah,
Right.
50 million. So this
But
is,
another way to put it is the fiscal 25 CWMP spending, whether it's cast in stone or not, it's double the total recommendations by Els in fiscal 24 for all three categories. So the question is where is that money going to come from?
yeah, well, this was presented at the workshop that we had back in January. We talked about the need for a debt exclusion override to pay for those CWMP projects in fiscal year 25.
So I almost feel like we should at least mention the fact that there will have to be some additional funding sources to cover these future costs. And I don't know if that's the right way to word it, but it seems to me that's the only way that it will work.
Something like this.
I think what you could say is we will need to have additional funding sources going forward.
Well,
Yeah, that's a good way to put it, Lillian.
Just going forward. I mean,
Because it's more than just 2025. So
Yeah,
going,
yeah.
yeah.
be required going forward. Yeah, that will cover it.
And I think that leads.
Do we feel
into-
comfortable with that?
I
Yes.
think it's all right. Mark, I think this is probably a theme that you've been sounding in your meetings with the
Well,
council and with town management.
Yeah, it's been a challenge ever since I've been here as far as the capital program.
Do we want to say
General
federal and
fund
state?
list.
Should we
Right.
say?
I think that's enough. We don't.
No, I don't think.
No,
you
no,
want-
no, 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 no.
Yeah, I
No,
don't. Don't
I
specify.
don't think you want to get into the weeds
You
with
don't wanna
it, just
get
a
into
general thing.
Just say additional funding. You don't need to see where it's coming from. There you go. Okay, you need to go back up. You added another comma where it shouldn't be.
All
I'm
right,
gonna
why
break
don't we
into
just-
your house and steal all your commas.
Why don't we just dispense with the commas and move on? It's 8 o'clock. We're 2 hours into this. But where's
Oh.
the comment, Lillian?
Go back. As in prior years. As in prior years, take that
All
comma.
right.
away. There you
Okay.
go.
All right.
Okay,
So Neil, just the rest of this, I mean, I realize that we haven't addressed your concern in detail, but we certainly have
No,
responded to your comment.
I think that's it. And you're going to you're going to leave the table of what was submitted, or you're going to have that is the current 5-year plan.
yeah, that's the 5-year
So,
submission plan.
Well, those are the 5-year budget
That is the submission
submissions.
plan.
yeah,
And-
you're asking if we're gonna put in a table of what was approved? Neil?
Well, that's.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know how the submissions helps anybody. They've seen that.
Yeah. Well, I think when we get into what's approved in the individual sections down below.
Yeah, and I
Oh.
and I think I don't think you're gonna you know, you're not gonna, you'd have to change the whole table to what actually got approved.
Well, it's not really approved, it's recommended. The town
Right.
council has to approve it.
That's correct.
Yeah,
Okay,
And I think the table is helpful looking forward to future
Yeah.
fiscal years to see what's
Yeah.
coming.
You know, I look at this table as sort of town departments' wish lists.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
that's good, just because then the town knows that there's a lot of projects that are on the wish list and
Yeah.
and how do we tighten the belt to
Yeah.
actually afford them?
yeah, and I think our expressing our concern is adequate.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right,
Okay.
next
Any other
section.
concerns on that one? Okay, we're now moving on to CWMP. Now, before I ask anybody for their comments, I have a suggestion. Because some of the readers of this report may not have ready access to the town manager's fiscal 24 capital budget plan, and because the $30.9 million project represents 46% of the total FY capital budget, I'm going to recommend that we add the following.
Where, Lillian? Where?
It's where you have 5 of the 18 are slated. And then you have the largest is 30.9.
Okay,
Next year in the sewer. And what I am recommending that we add, because it is such a huge project, we add a sentence here. This project, because I think people need to know what they're getting for the 30 million bucks. This project will install not only the 5.3 miles of sewer, it will connect 350 properties to the municipal sewer. It will collect approximately 66,000 gallons of wastewater every day and remove 6.6 kilograms a day of nitrogen from the Centerville River watershed.
okay,
But
all right.
I throw that out for everybody to think about, because I think it's such a huge project. We probably need to let them know what it's all about.
Well, I think more information is better on this project because a lot of the public doesn't quite understand
Yeah,
the
because
vast need for the sewer project
yeah,
and the repercussions if it doesn't get funded.
exactly. So
Yeah,
here's where I have it, Hector. This project will install 5.3 miles of sewer, comma.
The comma's okay there?
Yeah, after the sewer, line 3.
Thank you,
comma.
Chris.
I don't want you to get in trouble,
All right,
Hector.
I know.
give me the sentence, Lillian, and I'll figure out where to
Okay,
stick it.
no, go back.
Just give me the sentence, I'll type it out.
No. It starts on line 2 of that paragraph.
after the sewer
I'm gonna move
expansion.
After sewer, this
I'm gonna
this
put it
project
in,
will.
but I'm gonna type it down here and then I'll.
No,
put it
don't
in.
do that. Don't do that. You're gonna get confused.
Lillian, I'm the scribe. Okay, just give
All
me the
right.
words. Give me the words, please.
Okay, this project will install
Yeah,
5.3 miles of sewer, comma, connect 350 properties to the municipal sewer.
yeah,
To the municipal sewer.
Municipal sewer, to the municipal sewer. Comma. Collect. Approximately 66,000 gallons of wastewater each day and remove Yes, and remove 6.6 kilograms kg/day of nitrogen from the Centerville, from the from the center, nitrogen from the Centerville River watershed.
I can't wait till it comes to Marston's Mills.
There you go. But you know, I reread that and I said, well, it's a lot of money and people probably want to know what we're doing with it.
Yeah, no, that's
Yeah.
good. Would,
So
Lillian,
anyway,
would you,
that's my,
would you include the 5 new sewer pump stations too?
yeah, so
So that would be the final sentence. So I need to insert it up here.
yeah, insert it right there. There you go.
Yeah, yeah.
That's right. There you go.
Lillian, is there a number beyond the 350 that might, you know, how many people will be connected to that which is built?
That is the projection at this point.
Yeah, but that's like $100,000 per house.
Yeah.
Somebody's going to come to the wrong conclusion.
Well,
It is what it is.
it is.
Well,
yeah,
let
it is
me
what it is.
explain that project a little bit more. That's a main trunk line, and
Right.
that's the number of properties that live directly abut the main trunk line, but that trunk line will ultimately contain sewage flow from much more than 350 properties.
Well, so maybe that needs to be added.
I think you're getting into the weeds here.
Yeah. Okay, this is good words. I'm not sure we want to give much more detail unless somebody else
Well,
has
I
an
think
addition.
Mark has a good point in
I-
the sense that all these really expensive projects, especially on the main sewer line, will only connect a few, areas, but it will service many more areas down the sewer line. So it could be misconstrued in some way.
Yeah,
You want to put that it will directly connect 350 properties and service the entire town, like in the scope of the whole project?
Well, it may be service an extensive area. I don't know about the whole town, but
Well,
this particular project, yeah.
Well, what we're saying is that this project will install 5.3 miles of sewer. Yeah, there you go.
with hundreds more.
We don't know how many more.
I would just put extensive, something with
With,
an
with,
extensive. Okay,
with the possibility of extensions or more.
Well, here comes Betty. Hi, Betty. We lost you. Now we have you back.
Yeah, did everybody disappear?
Yes,
Yeah, Mark.
we did.
Mark lost his internet, and apparently I lost mine at the same time as the co-host. so
We
the
all
meeting-
lost it. Is,
Okay,
is that
Anyway.
parenthesis, the question is that parenthesis appropriate and?
I would
and
make it,
etiquette?
I would make it a little bit stronger if it was me.
Okay,
Initially connect 350 properties in municipal sewer. But serving, I don't know,
Sure.
serving many more residents. I don't, I don't know what the right way to say it is, but
I-
from what I understand from what Mark's told me is you got to lay the sewer line and then the sewer line can branch out in all different areas. So, I don't know what the best way is to say that.
These are
But-
main trunk lines. And again, collector lines will tie into these trunk lines in the future, connecting many more customers to the municipal sewer. And I would suggest that you let your scribe decide how to word that.
Okay. Mark, if I could ask a detailed question, the 350 properties,
Mhm.
they will be connected in fiscal 2025, or they'll
No,
have the
not
ability?
until, yeah, not until that trunk line is completed and it is active.
Okay,
Yeah, and so that's gonna be a couple of years after the appropriation.
okay,
Okay, so our scribe is going to mess around with the
I'm gonna
extensions from the trunk
mess around
line.
with this language and try to, I guess my view is, that I'm probably gonna go with some language like this, but add a sentence that says, that gives a sense of the initial scale, 350 houses with many more in the future. And I'll probably drop the gallons of wastewater and the nitrogen kilograms. But let me fool around with it
Yeah,
if you all
Yeah,
will give
and-
me literary license to do that.
And Hector, you may
Mhm.
have, there may be some data on beyond that actual trunk line, how many residences will be accessing that in the end.
Okay,
And I don't know, I mean, maybe Mark Els will have that information,
yeah.
but
Well,
it,
I'm looking at the description of this particular project.
What
and-
page is that on, Lillian, in the document?
I'm sorry,
What page in the document is
this
it?
page 72
Okay,
describes it.
yeah,
but
all right,
it
hold on
doesn't
one
have
second.
any-
Let me get the document. Hold on.
It doesn't have any projection of how many more will be added in the future.
Okay,
but
sorry.
there must be some data somewhere.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's not in this book, though.
So, yeah, maybe Mark Els will have an estimation on after that trunk line, how many
Okay.
residential areas will be affected.
Or
But I
maybe-
take everybody's point, which is people are gonna want to know what they're getting for this $31 million. So we should
Exactly.
give them some details to give them
Yeah.
a sense. It didn't give it before. Okay, got it.
Right, yeah.
Okay.
That's all that I had, because I looked at it and I said, wow, it's a lot of, it's 46% of the budget.
Yeah,
Oh,
okay,
Just-
good.
Can Mark clarify one thing, please? The 350 properties will be connected, what do you think, in which year?
Earliest probably 2027, 2028, because remember, the appropriation occurs
Yep,
next
I
fiscal
understand.
year. They got to do a project bid. They have to, then the construction could take a year and a half, depending
Right.
upon delays, who knows? But it's going to be a couple of years at least after the appropriation.
So my concern would be that people not read this as we're going to get 5.3 miles of sewer and 350 properties connected
Yeah.
in 2024 or 2025, because that's the way I would read it.
Right.
And
And
that's not
that's
going
what-
to happen.
And that's what I'm gonna finesse in my rewrite of this. But Lillian, I think your point's a good one. People are gonna wanna know what they're getting for their money, and basically, I'm gonna say that the 31 million, is to put in a central trunk line that initially will connect 350 properties with many more in future years. So I'll rewrite it to
yeah,
get the sense of that.
yeah,
Okay?
okay. Okay, Chris, you got any comments or questions about this?
I don't know if it's the proper section for it, but is the town ensuring that road work is not being done in sections where sewer is going to be installed in the near future? Like if they're doing an improvement project on a certain road, Are they gonna be tearing it up again for sewer, 3 or 4 years from now? Is there a process to make sure that that's not happening?
Yes, Chris, I can say that with certainty that that is Public Works plan.
Okay, I'm just looking at these, fiscal years in the chart here with different sections of the sewer being done. I would assume the town's not gonna be doing road work in places that will be torn up in the next, 5 years or whatever amount of time.
Nothing major, of course, they'll make emergency repairs as needed, but no,
Right.
they will not do a major overlay or anything like that if it's planned in the next 5 year to have a sewer line go in there.
Okay,
Jackie, any comments? Did she leave?
I don't know if Jackie's here again. We might have lost her.
I'm looking. No, she's gone. Okay, Neil, you got any
I'm
other
fine.
comments?
I'm fine.
Okay. Then we'll move on to general funds. Wendy did this part. Chris or Neil, any comments?
Looks good to me.
Pretty
It's-
straightforward. I think it's all right. Yeah.
It's very straightforward. Good job, Wendy.
Oh, thank you. You gave me an easy task, Lillian.
Enterprise funds.
Hey, before we do that, Lillian, Chuck sent me an email. He said he thinks the entire document should be right justified as well as whatever it's called. With
Yes,
this paragraph
it should
is
be
right
justified on both.
justified, so
Yes,
that-
right and left justified.
okay, all right.
You know
I'll
how
do
to
that.
do that?
Yeah.
Okay. Under enterprise funds, if you go down to where we have here, on the paragraph that starts the majority of FY 2024,
Yeah.
you just need to change after Marina. No, can you see Marina?
I'm sorry. Say that one more time.
Second bullet down, Hector.
Same
Oh, yeah,
second
yeah,
bullet
Marina.
down.
Yeah.
What happened was, when we changed all that, we
Yeah.
need now to put solid waste. You see what I'm saying? The bullets needs to
Yeah.
start solid waste.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. So instead of the
Yeah,
numbers starting,
think-
you put
yeah.
you put
Oh,
the
yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay.
words.
Got
Yeah.
it. Got it.
We did
Okay.
so much stuff that day that, and so then you would have 100,000 from its reserve funds.
Yeah. Hold on 1 second here. Somebody just come back in.
No, Chuck just left.
Yeah.
No, Chuck
okay.
had to leave, yeah.
Yeah. 100,000. All right. How's that?
Okay, the same for water supply.
Okay. Good. All right.
And the only other thing I had was at the very end of, no, go all the way down.
Wait a second, Lillian. Let me just fix
Okay.
this.
Right.
Okay. Go
No,
ahead.
that's.
Oh, that
that's-
should be
that's-
through as well.
That's
You've got though.
through, yeah.
Yeah.
There you go. Okay, now I got one other thing, and that is the second to the left paragraph.
Of this section.
Yep, it starts
Okay.
with water supply.
Yeah.
And somehow somebody put Hyannis water system at the very bottom of that paragraph.
I did
Yeah,
a couple
well,
of drafts ago.
It's not because Mary Dunn is in the Barnstable, it's in the Barnstable water supply. No, just put down water supply enterprise fund bonds. Water supply,
Is it an initial caps? Is that a,
yep, that's it.
okay,
I'm good otherwise.
okay.
Thank you.
So Neil, Chris, Jackie,
Neil,
does
Chris.
any of you have any comments?
I think you're good.
Yeah, it's straightforward. Okay, so we can move on to the comments of the 5-year plan. Chuck did this part. Neil, Chris, comments?
I agree.
Yeah,
Yep. Okay, then we've got concluding comments. Somewhere. Okay,
Lillian, I think I inserted that section that you wanted from last year's report, but I frankly don't remember where,
yeah,
which words, but I think it's in there, so.
yeah, I didn't get it in mine. Did you get that part?
What, tell me what section it was?
It's page 6.
Yeah,
Oh,
but what were the
22.
words? What were the words?
Okay,
I'll put-
in this report, CFAC
Yeah,
underscores the town's commitment to addressing wastewater and drinking water issues with urgency. CWMP impacts every citizen and property of the town. Well, if you just go to that, you can just,
yeah, okay. So,
you can just, there are 3 things. A commitment to the wastewater,
yeah,
the general fund investment in the town's assets, and the use of enterprise funds to maximize resources.
okay. And what page was that in last year's
Page
report?
6, page
Page.
6,
Of last year's report.
page 6.
Okay,
Okay, and it starts, and you'll see it. There
Yeah.
are there are 3 bullets.
yeah,
Yeah,
3 bullets. And
Yeah.
it starts, how does it start?
it starts in this report.
Okay,
Comma.
got it. Report, dot, dot,
Comma,
dot, 3
CFAC.
bullets.
CFAC :
Okay,
Okay,
all right.
Yeah.
I'll go find that and put that in the appropriate
Okay.
place.
all right. Any comments from anybody else? This is our last chance. We're getting our final version on the 10th.
Yep.
And
Well,
I think we trust you on that
okay,
on redoing that portion on the
yeah,
350.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, I think it's
I
a
think
good
that's
point.
fine. And then the bullets, that'll be,
We want to give people a sense of what the money is going for, but we don't want to get into the weeds too much.
yeah, exactly.
Okay,
Hector, you've done a great job. and
Thank you.
I want to commend everybody on their comments and input.
Yes. Thank you guys very much for looking at it. And we're gonna give you a super juggling hat, Hector. I mean, really.
all right.
Thank you, everybody. Is there anything more to come before this committee? Not hearing any. Is there a motion to adjourn?
I move.
I second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to adjourn. Hector, will you call the roll, please?
Sure, Lillian,
Yes.
Neil,
Yes.
Chris,
yes.
Wendy,
Yes.
Jackie, not here. Chuck, not here. Hector is here. That's a quorum. We have enough people to
Thank you very much, and thank
close
you,
the
Mark.
meeting.